Okay, hi, it's Colleen from Divination Counseling Service here to present the new moon of March 18th, 2026. Again, I'm doing it for Washington, D.C. This will occur at 9:23 or 9:22, depending where you're looking, p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Again, I'm doing it for Washington. I don't want to spend a lot of time on the pizza pie chart, but I did want to point out a few things to you that maybe you have been noticing. This is also the first new moon in the eclipse season. Okay, now I know the eclipse has been building, but now that we've gone through two eclipse charts, this is the first new moon after the two eclipses have already hit, which does give it some significance. With that said, I do want to point out that Chiron is sitting on the descendant. And what that means is that, think about what Chiron is. Okay, so Chiron is our wounded healer. I always say it's healing, but not without tears. It's also about alternative methods, okay, doing things differently. Okay, that's big. The other thing I want to point out is that Zeus is only about 1.5 degrees, maybe a little more on this chart, a little bit less on the next one, to that ascendant, making it very strong, and that's the war. And we can see that it's already going on with the retrograde. And the only reason I'm bringing that up is because I did talk about Zeus in the last chart, and I did talk about it being explosives and guns and firearms, but I did not say the war word. Now I'm going to say it's the war because we are in it. So those are things we're going to be, actually they come up in when I'm going to be discussing the sun-moon axis and the Aries point axis. Okay, so I'm going to do the Aries point and the sun and the moon, as always, because they affect you regardless of where you live in the world. Otherwise, this particular pizza pie chart, as they're called, this particular wheel, really only reflects the East Coast and within 1 degree or so. So I live about 90 minutes away. My chart looks very similar for this area, but it's still not exact. The cool thing about looking at the sun moon axis and the Aries axis is it affects everyone. So we spend the most time on that. But while I'm here, I do want to point out that there is a stellium of planets in Pisces in the 5th house. So what I would like to do is just go through my notes a little bit to pull up some stuff about what that means. Now, I also want to point out that at 2827, this is only 1.5 degrees out of the Aries point. So it's still very visible worldwide. So whatever's going on is happening in the world. I also want to point out that 28 degrees, 27 minutes is getting what we call very much to the end of the zodiac because it is in Pisces and we're getting ready when it hits Aries to start over. So right now we're ending things. We're still ending things. So realize that with Pisces as the energy of that stellium, we are looking at confusion, delusion, spiritual ideology narratives, especially the people getting into the religious stuff. Wow, is that speaking to Pisces? And realize that a lot of it's propaganda and illusion, because that's really a Piscean entity. But it also relates to sacrifices, compassion. Okay, a lot. So there's good and there's bad with this energy. It's collectively an emotional response. It's like we're all responding on some emotional level. In the 5th house, we are looking at the house of gambling. Oh, it's also the house of lovers, the house of children, the house of theater. So let's just talk about a few things that we might expect. Speculation, risk-taking, gambling, dramatic events, political theater. Boy, are we seeing that. Markets. The markets have been volatile at best. It's about risky policy decisions, and that relates to dramatic messaging that's going to happen to the public, speculative economic behavior, and theatrical political moves. Some of the stuff comes from my AI help. So you're really looking at a lot of emotional or ideological narratives that are being used to drive dramatic public actions or speculative risks. So it's all about let's make these people, you know, listen to what we have to say. So I am going to start now with the 360 because that's what I have here. Oh, and it's also realize that this Chiron is also about the house of open enemies, treaties, and diplomacy. Okay, so this is and war. Okay, because the seventh house is our partners, as we may all know, but it's also open enemies. So something to look forward to. Okay, and then this gets into my next section. So I'm going to move now to the section that I have no notes on, but I've already done it because of Mercury retrograde, as you I'm sure can imagine. So here I'm looking at the Aries point, and the only thing that pops out is the two nodes. But so our connections, all right, and our old patterns. But notice that the North Node is running with Mercury. That really highlights communication, news, things that are coming to us via the news. Now, I do want to point out that if I go to the sun and the moon axis just right away, or so, no, let's do this. Let's go to this Aries point first. I'm jumping ahead of myself because I have already done this. And now I'm looking at, and you notice that one Aries point to the other didn't change those nodes. They're still very highlighted in this. But now we're looking at a Neptune sun moon. Okay, so now the sun and the moon are sitting in a position where the Aries point is the midpoint between Neptune and the sun and the moon. Okay, this is really important. Okay, because when we come to this point, I'm just going to show you stuff here. You're going to see right away propaganda. You're going to see situations where people are more sensitive to the weather. And by the way, guys, Neptune is allergies. So the allergy concept, I sneeze all the time anymore. And basically, the other part of a sun, Neptune, is the ability of the body to take punishment. And what it does is it kind of makes us more sensitive, is what it does. But there's also with this a poor sense of direction. And even though we really want to be persevering and staying on that road, realize that cheated on the way. In other words, the road, people have cheated. Maybe you're not aware of it. Maybe you're doing it, not aware that you're even doing it. But it does give a poor sense of direction as well as delicate health. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the moon out because it won't change a thing and just add the moon in. And now we're looking at weakened, well, they call it a weak husband or death of husband, but just weakened, I want to say weakened males, but I think it's just weakened people. Okay. And they're weakened. I also like the fact that it immediately brings in the Uranus Pluto, which I'm going to talk about also. Okay. Now, the other on the good side, because everything is also good and bad, that we're one of the things that's happening is that we're dependent on certain people and that those people might be going through things and we're finding that we're dependent on their mood and their feelings. Okay, well, again, I don't like to look at politics, but we have that in this country with our fearless leader. Okay, everybody, worries about how he feels. But also note that that whole Neptune, Sun, Moon is also charitable people, that we could be introduced to some form of charity or someone who is more charitable during this time. Okay, I like the fact that the South Node is running with Zeus when I go to that. Neptune, illusion, disillusion, and all of that, and compassion. That one of the things that we realize is war is the old process. It's the old pattern. One of the things about the South Node is you always want to be concerned about repeating an old pattern. And it's time to move out of that pattern and move into the new, which would take place with the North Node. This is talking about the suppression, oppression of war, and also how war is very much a part of an old pattern. All right, so we're still learning that that doesn't work anymore. Now, the other thing that I picked up here, what as you can tell I've been working, is that when you come to the sun and the moon, Neptune becomes a midpoint. All right. And it's again, Saturn is like older people, maturity, restriction, separation. It can be difficulties in everyday matters. People are having really rough days. I know because that's what I do. I work with people privately, and it's been really tough. It's been tough for people. And I can tell you that it is also, you got to be careful with this, again, about the illnesses. But it is old age. It is, so it's a lot of stuff. It's also about physical hindrances. And those of us who are getting older totally understand that. If I take the moon away, all right, it does talk about the separation. And it really refers to separations of couples in particular, okay, where women are leaving men, men are leaving women. So there's that also going on. Although I'll be really honest with you, in my own private work, the issues that I have been seeing, and notice this about the Chiron Mars, it's like alternative ways. We're taking actions in alternative ways also with this. But realize that this plays into something else I'm going to show you here. If I come to Kronos, and by the way, look at that Kronos Jupiter hates, okay? And you can see that it right away equals Venus. So you think, oh, that can't be bad. Actually, it is. It is on a lot of levels. I also like this Poseidon Mars, and I'm going to start with that because, and notice how it goes right back up there. It's talking about morals and ethics and how important morals and ethics are. And this is particularly true if we're referring to a boss, okay? That we really need to be mindful of the morals and the ethics, particularly of the people that we are working with. If I go to Zeus Saturn, which is something else that talks about that, we get general damages. Okay, so there's perseverance, there could be losses in business establishments, obstacles and hindrances in work activities. That's what I've been hearing about. Okay, I really feel that right now a lot of people in high positions are taking advantage of people. That's what my work is telling me. That's what my private clients are going through. I've had everything from people who've been asked to work on their days off to people who've been asked to be like assistants when they're just learning their job and the boss is calling them away constantly. Other cases where bosses are taking advantage of people because they've been there a while and they know a lot of things. So it's basically a really tough time. And separations are definitely going to be a part of this. So I wanted to do a deep dive in that only because that shows up in my private work. Now, the other thing that we want to look at here. So if we have Kronos with Venus, right? We've got our charitable actions, our benevolence, our fondness, and it says, "Oh my goodness, this is so nice, great love." Getting help. Wouldn't that be nice? Okay. If I were to, so that's the Venus Kronos. Okay. Take Jupiter from there. This should be beautiful, right? Gifts through charitable endowments. I myself have been thinking about when I pass away doing an endowment for astrology because it's one of the only sciences that never has had in 8,000 years endowments. So, we are kind of thinking more about charity. Okay. Now, those are the good things. But one of the things you cannot ignore here is the fact that Kronos and Jupiter are running with Hades. So here's atrocity. Here is immortal, like in other words, no ethics. I can't even talk. This is a sacrifice of human lives, which we have been seeing, unfortunately. And it's great baseness and meanness, it's brutality, it's poverty, it's lack, okay? And I take Jupiter out. And we got financial scandals, bank failures, inflation, to get away, so to get black eye, basically they're saying to get a black eye. And just see how it didn't move. It's still there. It has Uranus in there. So another way to look at this. So this is what I do. Okay, you can go down these rabbit holes like crazy. And I'm going to take Uranus out because depending on how we look at this, and what do you get? You could get, so out of that, Adamitis, which is blocks. Okay? Blockages. So there's a lot here in this, between this area, which is really crowded, and this area, which is really crowded. The other thing that I didn't point out that I did in the other video that I did, but I do want to get to it, is notice ascendant is not that far from this Aries point configuration. That means that whatever's going on in Washington, D.C., everybody's going to know in the world. Or what's happening on the East Coast, everybody's going to know. So that also kind of tells us something or things are going on. So I did want to spend a little bit of time just looking at this cluster in the dial. And I also wanted to look at Kronos, Jupiter, Hades, because one of the things that is also true is that very soon that Jupiter is going to be gone from Kronos Hades. And I'm going to tell you what Kronos Hades is. It's criminal. Just as I told you before, it's deterioration. If somebody has, and I'm not saying any names, Kronos Hades equals sun, they are a kingpin. They are a mobster, mob boss, if you will. So realize that Jupiter might be there right now, so everything's all nice and cozy and whatever. That isn't going to stay like that. Jupiter's going to move on. By the time Jupiter moves on, Saturn will also move on and come to a place where it will directly square Kronos and Hades. Okay, so we don't have to wait long, but it is coming. And what will happen then is that if a boss has been taking advantage and it is unethical, they will probably be restricted, if not separated from their job. So it's really important to realize that astrology is, first of all, a process, and that every process kind of has to go through its moves, so to speak. And we are seeing that in real life. Actually, better yet, we're living it in real life. So I'm going to now move to look at Solar Fire, where I'm going to take this 360 dial and I'm going to break it down into a 90-degree dial. So basically, if you do your math, 90 degrees would go into 360 4 times. So we're going to fold it and fold it in order to do that. So we're going to step and do that right now. I feel like I have to apologize a little bit. My hotkeys are not working, and I don't know on the video if it's going to show when I have to go back to the main screen of the OBS, the broadcasting system. But if I did and you saw it, sorry about that. It only takes a few seconds, but I have to do it like the long way right now. I can't get my keys to work on the program. Not sure why. Mercury retrograde. Maybe that's all I need to know. So what we're going to do now is, I'm not going to look at this piece of pie chart. I did want you to see it. You can see that it's, again, a few minutes different. And I made sure that I was using Placidus houses on both of them. But unfortunately, they're still different, just the way it is. I also want to point out that Kronos is at 15 degrees, and Jupiter at 15 degrees are within orb of that midheaven, which is the United States. And even the, no, it starts at 18. So I lied, they're not in there. So thank goodness, because that would really do something. The 24-26 is still about 22-30. So it's within 2 degrees. That still applies. So let's take it now to a dial. And I got my notes ready. And I really want to do this. I messed up on the last video, so I want to do this right. I want to make sure I give you these degree points, okay? Let me go by the minute because it's 27, I believe, here. So I was going to move it to 27, just so that we have the right exact. So here we have 28 degrees. That's what that would be, 28, 27 of mutable. That's one arm. And it meets with 1327 of fixed. So we call that an arm. And what I'm going to look at first is the midpoint. So I'm going to go to both arms. And just so that we have it, the second arm is 2057, about here. Oops. Just so that you can see it. And from 57, it also meets up here at 557. There it is, 557. So that we're going to be looking at these points. These are the two arms of that particular axis. Okay? So we're going to start up here, 28, okay, 27, and oops, there we go. So this is our points where we're going to pick up the mid points. Okay, so I'm going to start with Hygeia to the Aries point, and I do want to point out that whenever the sun, moon equals anything that brings in the Aries point, that is bringing in the whole world. Okay, now here we're going to start looking at the Aries, everything that's going on with the Aries. Okay, and basically, first off, there is, I'm not even going to, Venus has gone into Aries, okay? So I do want to talk about that. And there's other astrologers that have been really talking about that Venus in Aries. I don't spend a lot of time doing that because I'm more Uranian. And I could, if I did all that, then I'd never get off the video. But I do want to point out that it could be a turning point for us, particularly related to foreign policy posturing. That's all. I'm not going to say anything more than that. And I would like to point out where I'm going to start right now, which is Hygeia to the Aries point, which is this whole arm. This is an arm, okay? Just so that you know, I'm looking at an arm. And basically it describes the initial manifestation of or triggering energy. So really what I'm saying is, remember at the very beginning when I said first new moon in the eclipse season, okay, because we remember 12 weeks. And so we got a couple, but this is the first one. And this is also referring, when you ever have Aries, it is the whole world. And one of the things that it's talking about is a collective focus on a health issue. The world is. So there's a public awareness of some kind of medical condition. Now, I don't like to use politics or what's going on in the world always, but it is an easy example. And I am going to tell you that if they're going to bomb oil, they are creating chemical toxicity in the air. That people may not die immediately, but they will die 20, 30 years down the road because particularly children will probably be able to get cancer. So it is a health issue. It's just like chemical warfare in a way. And basically, it's also running, which is really important, with Hades Mars. And by the way, they're in trine. So they're an easy flow right now. Hades, remember, is bacteria. It's degradation, things degrading, getting worse. So there's a lot. So there's damage and decay. Decay is a good word for Hades. And exposure of corruption, violence connected with unhealthy conditions. I just spoke about it. Something unhealthy becomes visible and active. Now, as I run down to midheaven, Uranus, I'm getting a sudden shift affecting leadership and political direction. Surprising decisions from leaders. Well, I think just going to war was pretty surprising myself. But expect things like political shocks. And by the way, coming out of DC because it's DC's midheaven. So I debated about whether or not to use it, but I thought no, because DC right now is affecting the world. You saw it with the ascendant. So we have rapid change in public direction, a public health or systemic issue that will emerge. Underlying problems or corruption that will then become exposed. Sudden changes occur in leadership or policy response. We're seeing that everywhere, where leaders are being taken down, leaders are being killed. So there's a lot of that going on. So what we're seeing here describes a trigger moment where hidden problems become impossible to ignore. And they're going to be open, like open disputes or confrontation. Things are going to become more open for us to see. Okay? I'm going to move on to, let me see where I am so I can find it. Yeah, see that sometimes okay. Admetus, I think is this one. Okay, let me find it. So I got to go to 2057. I think that's where we're going to see it. And then I'm starting to see some of this pop up. So this would be the other arm. Okay, yeah, there's all our hates. So Admetus is down here with the node. Admetus node is with Vesta. So when you're talking about node Vesta, you're talking about group loyalty, ideology, or spiritual commitments. Boy, they're trying to make this into a religious war. And in America, we don't do that. So that right there's a problem, okay? Groups rally around a cause. Well, I think we're going to be rallying around anti-war stuff, but that's, again, we'll see how it goes, but it is about the collective dedication. Admetus node is about blockages and blockages that occur within collective systems. And this is like getting things going, but then throwing a monkey wrench in there. So there'll be a lot of structural pressure. There'll be slow moving, but heavy conditions that affect all of society, and systemic constraints or stagnation. Well, they closed off the port where the boats go through. Okay, so let's talk blockages. The nodes, the connecting people can't get their oil. They can't get it, okay? So basically what we're talking about is the leadership confronts hidden problems. All right, so you're going to see a lot about alliances and agreements, power structures, mobilize. So there's a lot of confrontations, groups around going to their corners, okay? Systematic pressure. There's no resolutions will be slow, if at all. There'll be nothing. Hidden problems or unhealthy conditions will become visible. Leadership must respond quickly to unexpected developments. Now realize this is happening in the factory where you're working, or in the bank, or in the store where you work. So this is happening, okay? Political alliances and power structures become involved. I've never met a big structure that didn't have a political thing going on. I used to work in colleges. Political alliance and power structures also can become involved. And again, it's all about, taking, their political alliances, taking their sides. Tension or confrontations arise between opposing forces. Well, we can see that happening right in, everyday stuff. And it talks about groups mobilize around ideology and commitments. Now, one of the things we saw in that other chart was about that node Mercury. And one of the things I did say in the last video, and I do want to say it here, is that we have to be very careful where we're getting our news. Really. Because remember, with all that Neptune, you're not being told the truth. And if you're watching television, for example, well, if that's how you're getting your news, you're not getting news. Okay, I'm a reader, so I get my news by reading independent news through the internet. But for most people, they think if they put that 6 o'clock news on, they're going to get the news. No, they're not. And that's something that I think we're all beginning to understand and learn. Okay, that no, we're not getting any truth there. We're not getting any questions answered. Nothing's happening there. Okay, so as a result, the structural pressures, and I will say that there's pressure on the media. There's big pressure on what they can and cannot say. Okay, so with that, it's wanting you to know that this is going to make it very slow and difficult to come up with solutions. Okay, so Hades, which is decay, unpleasant truths, is now also making a connection through the ascendant to Mars. Okay, it's also going to start, here we go, my asteroids. So let me get to my asteroids so that I can read them to you and you will understand. Okay, so the sun is one set and the another set. So we start off with things like Dolores, Medusa, Shiva, okay, which is Dolores represents sorrow. It's like things getting worse. Medusa's the shock. You know, when you get the sorrow, the shock of it. And Shiva is the destruction in order to transform something. In other words, things are being destroyed, which will have to be changed. Okay. And this, when you add in pain level, which is also in there, and that does mean pain, it strengthens the cycle because it makes what we're experiencing more painful. It's like a painful awareness or difficult realization. And it's like when you just can't ignore something anymore, and that hurts have to be faced. The pain must be dealt with. We've got to do something. Okay. And that's going to involve your livelihood, because a lot of times it is your job, and your economic survival. And so there's risk, which is another word. Hill is another one, which refers to the uphill struggle and the rising pressure that adds a tone of difficulty or challenge. Hypnos is like a mass destruction, a mass, what do they call it? It's like what did I should have put it down. It's like when you're when there's like a something thrown in there to distract you. Thank God I do have. So with Hypnos, you do get mass distraction. Okay, you get complacency as a result because people are shocked, and you get collective psychological influence. So that is all running in this axis. Hill for an uphill struggle as the pressure is rising, and it really does add a tone of difficulty or challenge to what we're dealing with. Nostalgia is retrograde, which means that in some respects we're all kind of longing for that past. Uranus is in there for the sudden disruptions, and Chronos Zeus, which is like leadership that's directing the power. See, like I said, leadership's going to be a real problem in a lot of things that are going on right now, and that's one of the reasons we discussed it. Adamitas is that pressure, that block that causes a problem. So there's latent problems that erupt into the public view and require strong leadership responses. Okay? So also here we have the asteroid Duke, and Duke is our power structures or influential people. That's our very wealthy. Okay, this is the actions of the elite people and how they become central to the unfolding of this cycle, even if it's a personal element in your life. Schlecht is here because things are deteriorating. They're going in the wrong direction, and the conditions that we're dealing with are poor. So that the situation itself, it's like knowing that your systems are not working. Nothing is working. You can't go to HR when you have a problem. It's just nothing is working. Abundantia is in there too, again, emphasizing that wealth, that prosperity and financial systems, about everything that's involving what we're going on, right down to the immorality or the lack of ethics, or all of that relates to money, okay? So they'll expect with pain level emotional suffering, distress or hardship, painful realizations, and circumstances that hurt, but ultimately force awareness. Okay. Now we move into more. We have Morpheus, which relates to our dreams and our psychological influences. Okay, so it's things that relate to the collective dream state. But Shiva's there also, and that's transformation and endings that will ultimately lead to renewal. So there is a destructive element. It rages Shiva, but it also leads to the destruction of that's necessary in order for us to transform. Okay. Basically right now it's the recognition of problems. So it may be a new moon, but we're still kind of really looking at the psychological narratives, exposure to the truth, and destruction of transformation. Okay. Now we also have Rosetta running with Medusa and Hack, and they often appear when hidden information suddenly becomes visible. So look for that. In all of our experiences, look for that. This cluster alone suggests the revelation of something previously concealed, something you did not know. Okay. Now, with the retrograde emphasis, because these are retrograde, we're looking back rather than forward. And in political cycles, this can correspond with movements that appeal to past ideas. In other words, we have to do this. But remember, I already showed you South Node is a big factor. Hack, which represents shortcuts, is also about intrusion and the manipulation of our systems and breaches. So look for that, because we have to be very careful of computer hacks. Now, this is retrograde, so it would be computer hacks that have already happened. Some of us are dealing with that. Hidden or indirect interference is another way that they look at that. So cyber activity, and there could be sudden disruptions on our grid as a result. Polaris is also retrograde. So somewhere along the lines, there's going to be some kind of diagnosis as we attempt to repair the damages. So it suggests a healing process that addresses earlier problems. Rosetta is truth. Okay, it's unlocking the hidden information. And Mani is about ideological belief systems that we're all living with. Okay, Zeus Vesta. Well, that's interesting, right? A war overseas, basically. But it also represents directed force, initiative, or power. That's your Zeus. And Vesta is dedication, focus, and devotion to a cause. Okay, so there's going to be a concentrated energy toward a specific objective right now. Focused efforts are driven by belief or purpose. This can appear when groups mobilize strongly around a cause, and we've been talking a lot about that. Blockages, pressure, or slow-moving conditions. So what we're doing now is, and this is the Zeus Admetus, okay? And that, I'm trying to see, I think that was back into the next one. I don't think I went to the Aries point yet. Nope, I'm still in the sun. So just to get there, let's go here. It is Zeus Admetus. So I have moved on. I'm moving on now to the, because I'm looking, I'm like, wait, those are, okay. So we already did talk about this, the Zeus Vesta, okay? That was right there. And that's the pressure, slow moving conditions, things moving very slowly, pressure is building. We also have a Sirius Uranus in here. Here it is, bottom one. And what that is the resources related to nourishment, agriculture, and supply systems. Yes, our supply systems will be affected because of Uranus. There'll be sudden disruption and a result in radical changes. Okay? It can also represent sudden policy regarding resources. So that is another aspect of what can happen. And just to kind of give you, this is your first arm, okay? And just to kind of look at this, it's talking about the collective mood. All right, so I want to make sure, just so I'm in the right place, that we're in the there we are. Okay, that basically we're looking at how the collective mood is now becoming uncertain or emotionally reactive. And that's true even for those people who have been taken advantage by their superiors. Okay? A strong ideological dedication drives your actions. Force is applied against systemic obstacles. This describes a tense and unstable public environment. Okay? Now, I'm going to continue this, but it moves into the asteroids. Oh, let me just go through this for a moment. Let's just go to 2230. See, I'm jumping ahead of myself all over the place. It must be Mercury. So as I move forward, these are the other ones, and we don't have many, and that's why. Okay, So there's the Sears-Hayes. So be careful. There could be food problems with food or food supplies, which we did talk about. But it's also be careful of eating bad food that maybe has gone bad. Okay, Cupida Volcanus is talking about the pressure of these ideology organizations, okay, the ideological things, all right? And it's basically what we're looking at, and I'm just going to give you a few. These are asteroids. It's going to equal Kronos equals, so Kronos is in there, Morden is in there. See, Kronos is huge. That's why I had to talk about it. Morden, Hypnos, Eros, Isis, Messenger, Panacea retrograde, Lax, Varda, Myers, Jacobson, Merlin, Bano, Hermes, and Niobe, which is our pride. So let's talk about those. Okay. So basically, Crone is your leadership. Actually, it's Crone that's in the midpoint here, not Kronos, but they are read the same way. Okay. So it's like a high authority becomes visible in the global narrative. And it involves people in power. So there's going to be a lot of news about people in power. But realize that Morden is death, fatalities, and all of that as it enters the public conversation. And it talks about tragic endings and circumstances where death is part of the collective awareness. I think we can already say that's true. Aries point is, as we know, the world arena. Hypnos relates to confusion. Hypnos is also related to our sleep, but it's like a psychological influence and states where people are not fully conscious of what's happening. Arrows is our investment in the public. Isis is about, and when you throw Isis, it's about reconstruction, restoration, but it's all done in pieces. It's just like a piece of this and a piece of that. And it's a recovery or rebuilding after a loss. Of course, the only way you can do it is in pieces. Messenger is in here. Told you. Mercury, Messenger. I think something had Hermes, but I wasn't sure. Yeah, Bano Hermes. So we're getting it all through the Aries point is this message concept. Okay. So a lot of messenger communications, information, and important messages. Panacea is retrograde. Okay. So this is like attempts to fix the problem, but searches for solutions are a part of revisiting possible remedies, like things they've used in the past. So in that, and this is all part of that second arm, which we're now looking at here, which is how the situation manifests socially and structurally. And with Cupida Volcanus, we're talking about powerful groups that mobilize. Okay, and this is like people who are aligned with one another. Hayes Cirrus is the deterioration or strain within essential resource systems. And it can be anything from neglected infrastructures to issues related to food, agriculture, or food supplies. Okay. Exposure of problems within material systems that support society. Yeah, they closed a port. Okay. Things aren't getting through. Oil's not getting through. You know, supplies. This is the time of year where they need fertilizer. See, this is really important. Okay, so now all together, what are they saying? They're talking about leadership struggles to maintain clarity. Strong ideological commitment drives decisive action. Force is applied to overcome systemic resistance. There's going to be a lot of resistance. And that's true, again, if you work in a big place. Okay, so it's going to work very similarly, that maybe going to HR isn't going to fix the problem. But powerful alliances will begin to mobilize. In other words, when there's more of you that have the problem, something can be done. Underlying structural problems within essential systems can now become visible. Okay, so if you combine these two, what are they telling us? What begins as recognition of underlying problems becomes public issue affecting leadership, alliances, and resource systems worldwide. Okay, so that is what we're dealing with. All right. Yep, here we go. Okay, keep going, Colleen. So now we have Myers. Now, Myers, Jacobson, and Merlin are all running together. They're conjunct. And here we have psychological interpretation or profiling. That's Myers, that's intuition. Okay. Jacobson is a con man, all right, or the con. So, and Merlin is the idea of decisions or wide counsel or ways that we can actualize things. And it's basically referring to psychological insight that we can then inform advisors, is what they're saying. It becomes part of the collective narrative. Hermes is in here with Panacea, Lax, Varda, Morden, and Niobe. Okay, so again, these are all kind of forming these arms. And it's about information spreading while Panacea is searching for solutions. And that is going to be a huge factor as we go forward. So as we're worried about our messaging and in our search for solutions, we realize that the truth is lacking, is what's lacking. So among all of us, there are big gaping holes where we just don't feel like we're getting the truth. With Morden Niobe, there's a lot of concern about death and grief. Niobe is particularly children. Okay, so it's the death of children, which is a very big concern. Then we have Myers, Jacobson, and Merlin. And I already went through that intuition, the con man, and actualization is an analysis and insight where we're trying to understand the situation and guide responses. Okay, so it's like somebody has to step in and kind of explain what's going on. With Lax, we're going to see things like deficiencies and shortages that will affect society from the way it looks. Because again, we're talking Aries point. With Varda, again, we know what's lacking is the truth. So as you're getting information and this information is spreading with Hermes and Messenger, realize that you may not be getting the truth. There's truth is what's lacking. So basically, on the Aries point, we see things that bring themes. In other words, these asteroids are bringing in themes of authority and death into the public sphere. Communication asteroids such as Messenger and Hermes, which usually show us our information. These things are spreading rapidly, and while we're reflecting for a solution, we're realizing that there's deficiencies, there's shortages, there's a lack of truth. And with Niobe, because Niobe is the pride that goes before the fall too, it reminds us that the collective response does include grief and emotional processing, and particularly when there's the death of children. So with that said, and there's a lot of areas that we can look at that concludes our new moon for March 18th, 2026. And as always, I want to thank you for watching the video. If you would, share, like, whatever you like to do. I have no SEO though. And with that said, I hope till I meet you again, I wish you only happy readings.